Welcome, everybody. Welcome, folks. You want to come take a seat? We will get started. Can you hear okay? Can we get this out, Mike? Mike, how do we keep this out?
I'm going to have to just get them from a distance.
Okay, all right. All right, sounds good. Anyway, everyone come take a seat. And Eve, would you like to come up here? Here we go. Okay, well, welcome. This is our March meeting for the Weber County Republican Women's Group. We appreciate all of you being here so much, and we have some new faces here. Just wanted to remind you that we would love for you to be a permanent member of our club. If you'd like to be, Debbie, Williams, and Eve in the back are the ones you would talk about getting membership information and paying dues. So we would love that. I also have a bit of unfortunate information. Our longtime member, Donna Stevenson, died yesterday morning, and her husband, Leo, informed me yesterday that that had happened. And we are sending a card around that we would love to have you sign and offer any condolences to the family this difficult time. So let's see, we will start with an opening prayer. Eve Orr is going to give our opening prayer, and then we'll have the pledge by David Yonan.
Our Father in heaven, we thank thee for the opportunity we've taken to meet today, to listen to this information about our public safety. We are grateful for those who are here. Pray that thou wilt help us to expand our membership, share information that will be useful for the community. We pray for thy Spirit to be with us in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Everybody can rise and sing with me. And before we even start, I want to say thank you to all those that serve us. Okay.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you so much, David and Eve. So I want, first of all, to introduce our guests today, our panel that we've got behind us. They are all involved in law enforcement from one angle or another in our county or in our state as well, I should add. And I was, in thinking about a topic for this month's discussion, I was concerned that law enforcement is a forgotten issue. And this was provoked by a meeting that Sheriff Arbin conducted at the Weber County Jail, in which we were, a group of us were advised of the problems that exist at the jail in law enforcement in Weber County, just accommodating inmates in our jails. Also problems with recruiting, and I'm sure they'll get into some of these other critical issues that exist right now, but I don't think the public is very aware of what is going on in law enforcement right now. And this struggle our officers and our administrators, our elected officials have in carrying this burden for us and protecting our safety. So we are going to first want to introduce, this is Deputy Sheriff, Deputy Chief of Police, Jacob Suby.
He's ours.
He is standing in today for Chief of Police, Eric Young, who is out of town. Our Weber County Sheriff, Ryan Arbin. Our Weber County Attorney, Chris Allred, yes. And over here behind me, we've got our Mayor, Mayor Caldwell, who was so gracious to come today, and he told me that law enforcement is one of his passions in our city. So we want to hear more from him about that today. And then we were delighted to have Colonel Rapich with us. And is this Deputy Simmons, or Captain Simmons? I'm sorry, their titles change with each organization, but we're grateful to have them with us and really excited to hear about the overlay of the Utah Highway Patrol with some of our local law enforcement officers in promoting public safety. So we are first, I'm not sure how to organize this with this mic as well, but we'll see, maybe we can hear pretty well without it as you comment here. But the first thing that we wanted this panel to discuss and comment on is what are the most critical issues facing law enforcement within their jurisdiction. Okay, and it may change, depending upon who is speaking here, but if you could also rank them for us, what is the top concern? And then, below that, what are your secondary, tertiary concerns within your jurisdiction? Okay? And I'll get out of the way. Just feel free to comment. We'll see if we can hear you. If not, Mike, does this move at all?
I can move the stand, and it picks him up pretty close if I just bring it right close to him. But
Well, that's what we're trying to figure out here.
So much cable.
Okay, we'll try this and see if that works for us. But feel free to stand if you're comfortable with that, or just so you can.
Do you want me to start?
Yeah, because you're there, and I don't know if Officer Simmons or Captain Simmons was.
I'll defer to the colonel.
Okay.
I was going to defer to the sheriff, but this makes it easy because I can take the easy one right off the top of the head. But probably
We can't hear you, so you gotta
Can't hear. Okay. All right, let's see.
So there's not a tabletop microphone that you could move along so they can sit down and do this? No?
Is that better?
Yep.
Okay, I'll take the easy one. And then this is really predicated on everything that we're trying to accomplish as law enforcement. And I think everyone would agree. There's a lot of things that we need to do. There's a lot of challenges that are coming from a public safety perspective in our communities and everything that we're trying to do. If we don't accomplish the challenge of recruitment and retention in law enforcement, none of the rest of it matters, because we cannot accomplish anything that we need to do and the critical issues we have. We don't have qualified, competent, trained, and experienced police officers and public safety officials to be able to fill out the mission that we're needing to do. That's multifaceted when it comes to recruitment and retention. Compensation is obviously something that everyone's working on. It was very much a part of a legislative discussion that Senator Milner very much helped us with at the state level, and we're extremely appreciative for that. We're going to be able to leverage that a long ways. But it's also in getting and attracting the new generation of people and young people coming up, the 21-year-old. This year, we're going to start hiring people as law enforcement officers who were not alive on 9/11. If you can actually put that in perspective, wow. It's just as odd to them as Pearl Harbor was to our generation, and they're learning it the same ways. That's the generation that we're trying to bring up. We're bringing up a generation who probably hasn't seen the challenges to safety that maybe those of us who've gone through previously have seen, and have the opportunities of actually seeing the importance of public service and the importance of public safety and how incredible it is to be a part of something that matters that well. We're trying to teach that generation this. So with everything we're doing as well, being able to track people into to actually embracing what public service means, and then defeating the challenges that are coming with this crazy amount of instant information that this environment we find ourselves in, where anybody in the world can comment on any issue and talk to a billion people instantly. And there's no way you can get ahead of that, and trying to make sure we can keep at the forefront the incredible support we have, like the elected officials in Weber County, especially in Weber County, because it is a really incredible place to work. And Captain Simmons has one of the best assignments in the world. Captain Simmons is our commander for the highway patrol portion up in the northern part of the state, and he works a lot directly with law enforcement officials here, and getting people to where they actually, the people who support law enforcement and appreciate law enforcement and know the valuable role that it plays, to keep that information and that perspective and that understanding at the forefront, and not drowned out by a negative, smaller group that has an incredibly big voice. So, hope that kind of starts off really well. I took the easy one, I know I did, but there's a lot of others as well.
So is there anything else you want to mention in addition to retention?
That's the top issue. Is there anything else that's on that?
Specifically for me, if I was to start going down, that's the biggest one. Like I said, everything else is really predicated on how well we can do that. Information sharing is an incredibly huge challenge that is facing us right now, from a lot of different perspectives. Being able to share information within the law enforcement community that is critical to being able to do the best job we possibly can from a public safety perspective, to know what other agencies know, to be able to operationalize that information really quickly. Part of that is just the volume of information that's now available, and being able to sort through that and push what's most important. And so information sharing within the law enforcement community, information sharing with stakeholders. And I think that actually probably manifests itself in a lot of different ways. Decision makers and policy makers, like our elected officials, who are making decisions on budgets and where communities are going, where our state's going, making sure we're effectively sharing that information with them, and then sharing information with the public and getting that quickly and being able to sort through and categorize and actually be effective with volumes of information. An easy one to identify is body camera video. If you haven't noticed the demands and the challenges and the back and forth in conversations over body camera video, just being able to share that is an incredible challenge, to be able to get it in a fashion that's shareable, but really attacking that issue of identifying the public's right to know with what their elected and employed public officials are doing and what they're involved with. But from a law enforcement perspective, managing that with safeguarding someone's worst day and the worst experience of their life and what they're dealing with, and actually making sure those privacy concerns are balanced with the need to know what law enforcement is doing. A lot of incredible challenges with that as well. And then going through, probably if I added one more, it's just the challenges we're seeing with probably the willingness and frequency of seeing people more engaged in criminal activity, people's willingness to challenge law enforcement's authority, people's willingness to discard probably some of the more critical laws that we have with probably a less sense of accountability and less sense of consequence than probably what we've seen before. And we think we're seeing that manifest itself as well.
Okay, and would you just clarify for this audience how your role differs from, say, our, gosh, you got me so
Deputy
confused
Chief.
now. Our chief of police over here, or our Weaver County Sheriff? How does your role different?
Sure.
in law enforcement?
Great question. For the Utah Highway Patrol, we're part of the Department of Public Safety. And so the Department of Public Safety is a department within state government. The Commissioner of Public Safety is a cabinet member to Governor Herbert. He's appointed by Governor Herbert. I'm appointed by Commissioner Anderson and approved by Governor Herbert. And I'm specifically responsible for the uniform division of the Department of Public Safety, which is the Utah Highway Patrol. Probably the most dominant difference in that is our primary focus is crime and public safety issues as they relate to traffic issues. That transfers into a lot of different things where we're involved, and we work with our local agencies, work with the Sheriff Arbin, we work with Chief Young, specifically here in Weber County, probably better than we do anywhere. A lot of that has to do with just the way law enforcement is structured here as well. So we have the ability to share resources, to leverage resources when at critical times and big events. But we really kind of bring that to that criminal and traffic safety perspective and professionalism and expertise into the elm, and that's what we're dealing with. Most criminals use cars. Most criminals transit from one jurisdiction to another. And so we get to be involved in a lot of times when we're either they're engaged in criminal activity that involves a vehicle, or they're just moving from one jurisdiction to another, and we come encounter with them. That frequently gets us very involved with our local agencies, the county agencies and the city agencies, in dealing with the same individuals they're dealing with, sometimes in the same incidents that find themselves up under the freeway, whether that's a pursuit or a shooting or just a criminal incident episode that has to do with drug violations or wanted individuals. And so it kind of everything has to do, it all affects the community in Weber County and it affects the state of Utah. And so each of us are kind of trying to take care of those jurisdictional expectations and requirements and calls for service, but at the same time making sure we're leveraging our cooperative effort to make sure we deliver the best service possible when it's needed most. And I think we do that in Weber County probably as well or better than we do anywhere in the state of Utah. And I get to see it all over the state of Utah just because of the relationships, the structure, and then the coordination that takes place here.
Okay, thank you so much. Mike?
Why don't we go to the chiefs and then the two elected knuckleheads will come in after?
You want to go?
Yeah, sure.
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I just wondered, are you giving enough applicants for the jobs that are available?
No, we're not. To just put that in perspective really quickly, I guess that was one of the questions. If you went back 10 or 15 years ago, we would have 10 openings, 10 vacancies at a given time and have 1,000 people show up to test for those vacancies. Today, we're probably, from the Highway Patrol, we're probably sitting on 50 to 60 vacancies right now, and we'll have 25 people show at a time to be able to do that. Less people than we have vacancies. The reality of it is right now, if we have someone that can complete the entire hiring process, if they can get through the entire 3 to 4 month process, which includes written testing, background investigations, physical testing, psychological exams, backgrounds, polygraph exams, everything that we put someone through to vet them out to make sure they've got all the qualifications, the capability, and the ability to actually trust them with being a police officer. If they can get through that process, we're going to hire them. Where 10 or 15 years ago, they would get through that process and we would put them on a roster of probably about 100 people and maybe hire 25 or 30 off of that roster. We had way more people interested in law enforcement than we had openings for that. We do recruitment all the time. Captain Simmons handles recruitment efforts in the northern part of the state. He has counterparts all over the state for us that do those recruitment efforts, and we're doing them every single month. We are constantly keeping people in the recruitment process, where before it was, put an advertisement in the Salt Lake Tribune and you would have 1,000 people show up to take your test. We use social media, we use mainstream media, we use word of mouth, we use billboards, we use videos in gyms. And again, getting back to that, I think that part of the perspective is finding the opportunity to get our newer generation to understand what a really incredible opportunity it is to serve in law enforcement. And
Part of the reason why is just the generational gap and difference in approaching the job like that.
I think that's part of it. I think law enforcement in a lot of arenas has taken a really negative. I don't want to say the word beating, but it's really. I mean, there's been a lot of opportunities to really highlight relatively infrequent things that occur in law enforcement that probably aren't what we would expect them to be, and we probably don't do as good a job of highlighting the incredibly frequent, really great things that law enforcement officers are doing every single day, all over the state, over and over and over again. I mean, they really have the opportunity to be there and be an influence and have impacts on people's lives like almost no other profession does. And we don't probably do a good enough job of highlighting that. I think we're doing better. I think we're seeing more and more of a need to put a lot of emphasis on that. We need to continue to do so.
Maybe just quickly, but I want to give everybody a chance to speak. Hold it. Sorry. Sure we got it right.
Speak right into the microphone, that's a very bad microphone.
Can you guys hear me? And I'm generally pretty loud, so hopefully you guys can hear me pretty good. But I appreciate you guys having me here. Chief Eric Young really regrets that he couldn't be here. He just has an out-of-town meeting that he had to attend, but gives me the opportunity to come and meet with all of you and have this opportunity. So I'm grateful to be able to talk to all of you, to kind of hear what we're seeing and what our agencies are having struggles with. But the first thing I will say is I would echo exactly what Colonel Rappich said, is that the recruitment and retention is critical. But what the next step I would take that to, and what is really affecting us in Ogden City and in law enforcement, is that it's not just that we don't have enough people to do the job, it's that law enforcement's being asked to do more than it's ever been asked to do. And so we're expected to be social workers, we're expected to be drug and alcohol counselors, we're expected to be parents, we're expected a myriad of different things. And we kind of have a mantra at the Ogden Police Department of, we can do anything, we can't do everything. So what really needs to get focused down to is, what is the most critical role of law enforcement and what is our overall goal, and finding those exact things and focusing effort on that. And obviously keeping our community safe, keeping the members who live, work, and play within Ogden City is critical for us. And then finding good partnerships with our neighboring agencies so that spreads countywide. The goal isn't to, create a nice environment here and push it everywhere else. It's working together as law enforcement. So the big thing for us is trying to find collaborations with other organizations in the community that can step in and fill a role that law enforcement has now been pushed to do with no training, no skills, no ability. Taking, much like Colonel Rappich said, we have a lot of young officers. Ogden City, we're probably roughly half our agency is under 4 years of experience. That's just the turnaround that we have. There's not a lot of draw to come in. So when people are retiring, we're bringing in a lot of young officers. So to take a young officer like that and say, go solve this person's mental health crisis is very difficult. And we're making great strides with things like mobile crisis outreach team. And those are some great efforts that are going, but we have to continue to build and expound on that and have the continued funding to be able to build those programs so that it's a 24/7 program. At Ogden City, we deal with the homeless issue quite a bit in Ogden, and that's a very critical and big issue, and it really takes up the vast majority of our community policing bureau, which traditionally that's not the role of a community policing officer, right? It's to build relationships with community members in the various neighborhoods that they operate, we work in, to try to build that role between us. The hard part is that we're just kind of being inundated by that problem, that's really the focus. But it has to be a focus. It's not just about helping the neighborhoods that feel inundated by the homeless that may be taking over parks or various things, but it's also those individuals who are facing homelessness that need the help and the resources. We've made great strides at Ogden PD. We've hired 2 full-time homeless advocates, and so their primary focus is to help get individuals the proper services. And we need to build that beyond that and have the organizations and the facilities where everything's kind of a one-stop shop. And so kind of going in that direction, taking away from me, the person that responds to a 911 call of trying to solve all your problems, we have a resource to then build to the next step to the resource. And so the funding and those partnerships are critical. And so building that through groups like with all of you individuals here, helping us build those connections will be huge for us in being successful, because then we can focus on the things that need to be focused on. So our community policing can actually start participating in more neighborhood watch meetings so we can affect direct neighborhoods, maybe what they're happening, and there's less delay on a neighborhood who's, let's say, struggling with a house that has a drug distribution issue that we think might be going on. Sometimes that can get delayed because of just the amount of work. So for us, that's a big thing. It's trying to narrow down what is critical for us to do, and then what partnerships can we build to get the end result we need, but not rely on a badge to solve the problem. We can't arrest our way out of every problem. We can't book everybody into jail to solve our problems. Not to say that some don't need to go to jail. And that kind of takes me into my next kind of issue that I think we have in law enforcement right now, and that's our system for holding people who are habitual and violent offenders. It's becoming way more difficult to keep people locked up in jail and prisons. They're getting out much quicker. Oftentimes they're being booked and released almost immediately, and then within a day or two they're violating again. So I know that our Justice Reinvestment Initiative, the goal was to reduce recidivism. However, we're seeing a cycle of people coming in and out of the door of violent habitual offenders. And so it's working on sentencing and guidelines that would better put people into jails and prisons for the length of time that they need to, and then still provide them the resources to eventually, hopefully, move away from being that revolving door. But both of those are taxing on departments that are undermanned, understaffed, and inexperienced. We just have a lot of inexperience, and so it's very taxing. So I would say those are probably the critical ones that we're facing for us in law enforcement.
Thank you so much for this.
Yep.
Well, let me first just share and express my appreciation for Lorraine and the Republican Women's for being here. This is a great group. I get to come once in a while, and this is a great group, and we know that you support us, and I want you to know that the law enforcement up here, we support you too. I'm going to take a little bit different turn on the questions. Those that the chief and the colonel that have shared is widely common with the sheriff's agency. We have a different component. We have the jail, and we're suffering the same issues with staffing. And sometimes when you have short staffing in a jail, then we can't provide the services that a jail should provide. And just 3 months ago of our jail, we have about 260 employees fully staffed. 3 months ago, we were down 45. That's hard. And it's because of a lot of what we were just shared with today. However, what I want to make sure I reinforce today is those that you see up here, we all have very, very difficult challenges. The one thing that I absolutely love and can genuinely tell you that when we have an issue, this team comes together like the Avengers. It's true, because we all share the same problems. And in my experience here, I have not ever had an issue where Ogden Police Department will not work with us. I've never had an issue where Chris Allred says, that's your problem. I've never had Mayor Caldwell say, well, good luck with that one. He'll say, what can we do to help? And then in the wonderful highway patrol, the ones that their color of their uniforms should be a little lighter, maybe not so brown, maybe look like sheriff. We have a fantastic relationship as well. And I mean that sincerely. The Colonel and I have worked on a few issues. And one thing that also is really cool to know is when I call, they answer. And it goes vice versa. There's a lot of stuff that's said in the media or passed back and forth. One thing that is absolutely our goal and that we are determined to do is find the right solution with whatever problem. Of course, we hear stuff in the media where something pops up and it's a big deal and everyone starts thinking, colluding, and wondering how things go. But these men and women that we have serving in our community are genuinely dedicated. They really want to protect and serve. And one thing I want to note too is ask, what can the public do? The best law enforcement that we could ask and have in any community is a strong relationship with the community. As you guys know that in life, as we get older and our ambitions and desires broaden, we look for somebody else to help us. We want to invest money, but we want the money manager to make us millions and just kind of put it over there and let someone else take care of it. We hire coaches to coach our kids and teach them the best skills that they can. Sometimes that removes us from that parent and child relationship. But for us, and I love the term that Chief Subi just said about we can't arrest our way out of everything. We can't depend on the badge to take care of the issue. It really is a partnership. That's how we become successful. And there's always that question, what can we do? What we can do is a relationship is say hello to our guys that are wearing the uniform. Just say thanks. That's the biggest thing that anybody can do to help our law enforcement is just say thank you. That gives us so much more gas in our tank when someone recognizes that we're even there and say thank you. I would ask that on a personal level to do that, also on a professional level. Also, go to your council members and your commissioners and tell them, hey, give those guys more support, those guys and girls. We need that. One of the things I think is worth mentioning, I get asked this a lot. So bear with me on this analogy. If you take a city of 100,000 and you're staffed with 100 officers, and you go back 25 years ago, and you move it to today with the same population, same staffing, we in law enforcement cannot provide the service that's expected because there's a lot more demand out of this. When the society or community has an issue that looks rough or looks violent, it falls to law enforcement. And it's true. We can do anything. We struggle to do everything, but we want to do everything that we can. Just a real quick analogy is I have one of my chiefs working on an article. And in this article, he goes through our reports that are years old, and he measures how long it took us to write reports on let's say, a domestic violence case. And he's going through and see how many officers responded to the call and how much time it took to, let's say there was an arrest in this situation, and then all these different factors of what it takes. And it looks like the average was right around an hour and a half to an hour and 40 minutes where this process would from beginning to end. Today, and there was 1 to 2 officers generally. Today it takes 3 to 4 officers and it takes up to 3.5 hours. Back then we didn't have body cams. We didn't have tasers. We were just getting into car cameras. And so there's a lot more evidence. There's a lot more responsibility. And we want to do this service. We want to make sure that the victim in this domestic violence has the proper resources to find shelter, to find help, to find someone that can help them get that stalking order or that any other order that may to help protect somebody. And it's something that we really want to do. But sometimes human, when you see calls lining up on the screen that you got to get to, sometimes we try and get through that and then go somewhere else. We need resources and we need help. And again, I just want to reinforce, thank you, Lorraine, for putting this together. This is a fantastic group. We got great people up here. Thank you for your support. Thank you. Anything else?
Thank you so much. No, we appreciate your comment. You also need to just give a pitch for the new jail.
Oh.
Always be closing.
All right, I need 62 million. Sold.
Can I just ask that when you guys get up there and speak, if you tell us what your names are and what department you're in?
I would be happy to. Thanks for the reminder. My name is Ryan Arbin. I'm currently the sheriff of Weber County.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm going to address Lorraine's comment. There's a process that we go through, and a lot of the decisions. I touched a little bit about this earlier. When we make decisions, we want to make sure that we're very careful, that we're not jumping the gun. No pun intended with what we do, but it's very critical, and we rely on data and resources and analysis of all kinds of things. And right now, Weber County needs to add to their jail in size. We've had, as you guys know, a really rough 2 years, and we've had to make some tough decisions on the way we operate in the jail. And consequently, we've asked our partners in Weber County to help us. And sometimes that help has been a real challenge for them. Chief Subi and others have said sometimes there's people that need to be in jail and they can't. Primarily right now for Weber County Sheriff's Office jail is we don't have the room. Because of the last 2 years, the spikes in crime. So what we do is we created a matrix of sorts. And basically, without getting into all the details in the matrix, if it's not a violent crime that was committed, we ask that the other agencies, including our own, cite and release them is the term. And so because of all these spikes in crime and with COVID and we have greatly improved our medical in the jail. And within the COVID, we've had to use quarantine sections. So all of you that know the game of Tetris, and you know that as the game goes faster and you got to get the pieces formed, right now, the staff, the amazing staff at the sheriff's office, we are on level 400 in Tetris. We call it a master's game of Tetris with people. We are literally moving sections and groups of people almost every day to make sure that we fit the needs for their health, which is tied a lot to COVID-19. COVID-19, as you know, is, without getting political, for some, it's literally the end of the world, and some it's a government conspiracy. What we know on our data and information from all sources, it affects everybody differently. Some people can kill them, and some people it has little to no effect. Regardless, we have to provide the right service and medical attention for those that get it. And in doing so, we're doing our very best. But within this problem, it all happened at one time. We sent out last year for a feasibility study, and the feasibility recommended that we add medical and mental health wing, if you will, and then 2 additional pods, which should almost get us closer to 400 additional spots. And we also want to do a new community release center. The community release center we have now is the old Kiesel facility behind Mayor Caldwell's office. And as much as they want it gone, so do we. And so we're trying to find the best results to find out where we can have a community release for those that to give you just a quick understanding, is if an individual is arrested for a certain type of crime, but the judge and the public deems that, well, we need to keep this guy working, right? Because so he can provide for his family. And it's not really a violent arrest. He seems like to be a decent person, just made a mistake. Well, then he would go to work during the day and then sleep there at night. And so we had a pretty robust program up until COVID, and we've had to end most of that and take the staffing from there and move it over to our jail because we were down so much. So that's where we're at. So in this process, we're going through with the commission, our partners. It's not something I'm just going to say, hey, give me 62 million. We're doing this a methodical process. I invited a bunch of leaders within our county about a month and a half ago. We ran it through them to get a feel of how important it is to the public. Where's the need? What can we do to improve on things? It was well received. We're just waiting to see for the commissioners to give us some support, and then we're going to go through slowly, methodically to make sure that when it comes to the public, which we think will be for a vote, a general obligation bond, that everybody knows everything you need to know to vote on it rather than just, well, because the sheriff wants it. We don't operate that. We include our community partners and members to help us make those decisions.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Next, we'll have our Executive Officer, Mayor Caldwell, and Weaver County Attorney Chris, who have a little different approach to this.
Thank you, Lorraine, and thank you to all of you for, as been mentioned, the partnership that we have here. I'll tell you a couple personal stories for me and why this matters for me and why law enforcement, as was mentioned, is a passion of mine. You raise your hand and throw your hat in the ring and run for an election and get involved, and there's a lot that you realize you don't know. My first full day on the job, I was home reading a bedtime story to my 8-year-old daughter, and my phone started ringing in the kitchen, and I was like, oh, that's 3 times in a row. I probably had to put her to bed and go answer the phone. And it was my executive assistant that said, 5 officers have been shot. One is probably not going to make it. And I immediately went to the hospital, stayed at the hospital till 3:30 in the morning, went home, didn't sleep a wink, woke up the next morning, went to the public safety building, and there were 15 to 20 news trucks out front. It was a lead story on the Today Show. And I thought, what have I gotten myself into? But going through that process with all of the families and how it impacted everybody in the community was really eye-opening for me. I would not wish that on anybody ever. But watching how the community came forward and supported our law enforcement groups and everything else really woke me up to, there is so much that these guys do, so many sacrifices they make, so much involvement from them, so much passion from them, that we've got to figure out what to do and how to support this. It was mentioned retention and recruitment. Last year, when I was working with legislative issues, and we thank Senator Milner for her support and everybody else, there were 700 open positions in law enforcement across the Wasatch Front. 700. So when they say this is an issue, it is a real issue, and that's something we've tried hard to address. I'm a Republican myself, speaking in front of the Republican women. It feels bad to say, but we've done 3 truth and taxations to help support public safety, because one of the issues we have with 700 open positions is, on average, it takes us about $86,000 to train an officer up. Once they put their application in, to put them all through, put them on the streets, give them the training, put them through posts and everything else. And if we're in a position along the Wasatch Front where we're stealing from each other all the time, that was my joke to Ryan earlier, that Jake's not on the block, so stop there. But that's an issue that we're actually dealing with right now, that communities that are busy like ours will train them up, spend all of that money putting an officer on the field, getting them ready and prepared to deal with what they deal with. And then if they get just recruited and moved around all the time, you don't have the chance to learn the community, to learn what the neighborhood issues are, to learn who the bad actors and the good actors are, to go to community safety meetings and to help encourage everybody. One of the things that does help with law enforcement is when somebody shows up that they know and they trust, they've dealt with before, it really does help calm a situation and calm an environment. And if we're constantly playing this revolving wheel where everybody just kind of moves around, or they're going to get an extra $1.50 in Salt Lake, or they're going to get an extra $3 an hour here or something else, it really does destabilize the department's culture, its chemistry, and everything that we've been trying to build. All that being said, I want to give huge credit to the men and women of the Ogden Police Department. In the last 3 years, we did a press conference a number of months ago. Even with COVID, we had a 30+% reduction in Part 1 crime in our community. And in 1988, when we had 65-ish thousand residents in our community, we had 144 sworn officers. Right now, we have 144 sworn officers, and we're almost 100,000 people. So keeping up with how do we give these men and women that are doing these difficult jobs the resources they need, the tools they need in this certainly new environment is amazing. But our guys and men and women, and that's a thanks to everybody in here, and our Weaver County attorney as well, they've been willing to do the hard work and have kept focus on what is happening in our community. A 30+% reduction in 3 years is an amazing number. And if you look at the trends across the country, nobody is seeing work being done like that. So please give it up for our esteemed team here that has done difficult work. And part of that comes to the attorney's office as well. When we find some people that really need to have an intervention and really need to be worked on and to get access to resources, we're not afraid to prosecute that. We're not afraid to say, this is not acceptable in our community, and we will figure out a way to address that. And that's a promise that I've made to them, and it's a promise I'll make to all of you as well, is that the work that they do is critically important. It's the foundation the rest of our community is built on. Public safety, as was mentioned, is a huge passion of mine, will continue to be as long as I'm in office. And supporting them, as Ryan mentioned, just saying thank you for what you do can take put officers on a whole nother level. There has been a trend in social media and in the regular media to vilify and to do some other things that I think is entirely unfair. And so when the community comes together, when that officer, Jared Frankham, passed, there are a couple officers that come out of Chicago, and they go to every fallen officer funeral, and they pull our chief at the time aside and said, I have never seen a community come out like this. I think we estimated we had 15,000 people that line the streets, school children holding up messages and everything else, and it really did change the tone for what happened there. So my job as mayor is to listen to all of these people that are much smarter, much better trained than I am, and figuring out how we can direct the resources and tools they need to do their job, and to do it with joy and not to be hammered, to have mental health and not to take all of these issues home to their families and everything else. And it's a really difficult thing to do. So I come to these more to listen, to take notes, and to figure out how we can provide tools and access so that everybody gets to leave feeling proud of what they've done, the contributions they've made, the weekends they've missed, the birthday parties they've missed, the holidays they've missed. They're always on. There's never an off moment for all of them. And the more we can do to support that, I think the better we're going to have in terms of the department and the community and everything else. So again, thank you to you all for what you do. My job is to support them and to do everything we can to provide the tools. And I hope that's what you all would be willing to have conversations about in the future as well. So thank you all very much.
Chris, you want to follow up?
Hi, I'm Chris Allred. I'm the Weber County Attorney. Appreciate you having me here today. My role is a little bit different than my colleagues. They're boots on the ground. They're the ones that are called out initially when a crime occurs. They investigate the crimes. They occasionally have to arrest someone, incarcerate them, all of that. Then that comes up to our offices, the prosecutors, and our role is a little different there, but we are part of that process, and we have to proceed from there to hopefully hold people accountable that need to be held accountable. But in doing that, please understand that our goal is not simply just to incarcerate people. We are constantly looking outside the box for things that we can do to rehabilitate people, for instance. And so you hear a lot these days about justice reforms, for instance, and I'm certain that much of that comes from a really good place where we as a society want to see people succeed, and we want to be compassionate. We want to come up with ways to do things beyond simply incarcerating people that are productive, and that's all as it should be. But my concern is that sometimes accountability gets lost in that discussion. And so what is one of the problems facing law enforcement? I believe it is perhaps a little bit of a slipping of that recognition of the critical nature of accountability. We work with, from time to time, different organizations, one of which is called the Other Side Academy. I don't know if you've ever heard of them. It's a really cool organization, and it's composed of or comprised of former felons, people that have been in prison that have been through the system that really understand what it's like from that side of things. And what they do is they take in felons and they put them to work and they keep them in an environment where they are held accountable. And if they don't follow through with the things they need to do, then some consequences come into play. And a group of members from the Other Side Academy recently wrote a really fascinating opinion piece. And I want to read you just a couple of quotes, if I may. They begin, the guest opinion piece is called, "In Criminal Justice Reform, Accountability is True Compassion." They begin by saying, "We, the undersigned, are a group of former longtime felons and drug addicts. Collectively, we have been arrested over 400 times. Between us, we've been incarcerated for well over 150 years, and that was the best thing you could have done for us." And I'm just going to read you a few snippets from this. It's a really great article. They go on to say, "If people commit crimes that hurt others, they must be held accountable. Don't send us to jail because we're addicts. Send us to jail because we're criminals." And they proceed to say, "We have over 100 students who have been arrested an average of 25 times. That statistic might tempt you to conclude that arrest doesn't work." Think about that. An average of 25 times these people have been arrested. And certainly the conclusion you might reach is arresting people clearly doesn't work. But listen to what they have to say. I found this fascinating. These are people that have been through it. "We have over 100 students who have been arrested an average of 25 times. That statistic might tempt you to conclude that arrest doesn't work. In fact, it says the opposite. What doesn't work is arrests with no consequences. Our students have been arrested so many times because they have been released with minimal stays without truly being held accountable for the magnitude of their crimes. Those who do best at the Other Side Academy are those who are facing the most serious legal consequences. Accountability is compassion." And then, sorry, I'm going to read just a little bit more because it's so good. They say, "Our 5 years of data show that when students arrive with clear accountability, they are more than twice as likely to stay the full 2.5 years. And when they do, 88% of them stay out of jail. Truly compassionate criminal justice reforms should mean the following. 1, hold us accountable. Give criminal addicts like us sentences in proportion to the crimes we commit. 2, give us options. Offer us alternatives to incarceration only if there is evidence that they work. Then allow us to go only after sentencing us. That way, we will know clearly what consequences we are facing. And 3rd, hold us accountable if we split. Then, if we fail to complete a program, make sure we serve that full sentence, period." And they conclude, "We plead with political and criminal justice leaders to give people like us a chance to truly change. Getting accountability right is the right way to help us change." And I thought that was a fascinating article written by people who have been on that side. And that really sums up my philosophy as well. I feel like all these folks I work with, including the prosecutors in my office, are genuinely compassionate. We want people to succeed. We truly do. But failing to hold them accountable does not achieve that. And so, in my opinion, that is something we need to think about as we're speaking with our legislators, as we're considering what really is the compassionate approach. How do we help people? Please don't let that get lost in the discussion or in your thoughts. And what can we do to further things like that? Well, among other things, you support our police officers, you support and vote for good people like Mayor Caldwell, like our excellent Sheriff Ryan Arbin here. He understands these things. He's created an atmosphere where his office works well and understands these things and tries to implement them. So that's sort of my philosophical bit for you, Senator.
So I've heard several of you say we just can't do everything, and we're asked to do everything, which I totally you're talking about how there are multiple pieces of this that need to work together to try to get it right. And, you know, are willing to be accountable, willing to go through programs, and willing to try to get a good start. And we all love those stories of people that kind of face that challenge and have been able to return to society and raise families and so on. How do we get it right? I mean, we have this discussion almost in every legislative session, you all know, right? Yeah, we seem to be struggling with finding what the right combination is in order to get it right. How do we do that?
Well, let me give you what I think is a very good example of getting it right. And I think we try to look for other ways to follow perhaps in this model. Drug courts, for instance. I think drug courts are one of the most effective tools we have to deal with one of the most pervasive problems we have. Drug addiction, right? It's a horrible, pervasive problem. We all have great sympathy for these people. Drug courts, I believe, work very well, better, I think, than almost any other program out there. And I believe the key reason that drug courts work is basically what the Other Side Academy folks are saying, is because there is a serious accountability component. There's excellent, excellent education, training, and opportunities for these folks who attend drug court. But the motivation often to stay initially past those very difficult initial stages is the fact that there are significant consequences that await if they fail to follow through. Often that's the only thing, especially initially, that will keep them going. And when they get past that point, you don't need to rely on the consequences as much because they've reached a point where they can actually make some changes. But initially, if you don't have those consequences, what we see is people will leave before they complete the program and they will just go through the cycle again and reoffend. So I think programs are important. We should not overlook them. Getting it right, though, includes having significant consequences for people who fail to follow through.
Any other use for Eric?
You want to respond to Senator Miller's question at all? If not. Listen, I meant to open this up. We have just a few more minutes here, about 10 minutes. If there are questions that you would like to address to our guests, go ahead.
I just want to thank you all for coming. And just remember that we're from the Republican Party, and we intend to get you where the first is giving you more money and more power than you have now, and not defunding the police, but supporting the police. So we're here for you.
Lorraine, if I may, and thank you, Jim. I'm a retired fire captain from Los Angeles. I've been through the riots and I just will take a minute because I can speak a little freely more than the gentleman behind that. And that is from LA, I've seen all this happen. And now that I'm here, I'm seeing it happen with folks. And we as the community, we are the biggest help for these gentlemen and resources that are there to protect us and do our community well, keep us healthy. And that takes us getting involved. And as community leaders, like Republican women, we have to go to our neighbors and our friends and the community and speak for them. Because as a retired fire captain, I can speak a little more freely and more direct than I could when I was on duty or still working as a fire captain. The thing is, thank you, Chris, for following it up. Because what you said about the program, that is perfect. Because what it does is accountability is very important. We're all compassionate. And as our elected leaders, our sheriffs, our officers, our mayors, elected, but more importantly, us as people, we need to tell our children, to tell their children, to say, you know what, the biggest problem is recruitment, retaining, correct? Number one, for these folks. The reason that is because we allow the community with these, to put these gentlemen and their officers under a microscope, 24/7, all the time. And it should be transparent. But we've got to teach our neighbors and our children that these are not the bad things. They're trying to do us good. And when we drop a rock on our foot, I say, no, these police with the media and everything, they're just a bunch of, jerks, whatever. What we're doing is we're taking our own safety and our communities away. Because they're only doing what we're putting them there. So that's all I wanted to say. So take it home. We all have to be that part, helping them help us. Okay? And again, and Chris, if I can get a copy of Ruth, because
Absolutely.
with LA County, we had a program with the fire department, and it's called the inmate groups, the brush cutters. Accountability, work. Work is dignity. We don't teach that to our young people. Work is dignity, and accountability is dignity, as you pointed out. And they want to be accountable. And so our program was great, because the inmates that were in that program never wanted to get kicked off the brush cutters. That was the accountability. And so folks, just remember, it's up to us and our legislatures to help them get the budget in there for these folks so they can do the job for us.
Thank you so much.
First of all, a big thank you to our law enforcement. I can't thank these men enough for the risk that they take every day on the job for us. It's an unacceptable risk to me. That's why I'm not in law enforcement, right? But they are willing to take that risk on the job, and it's an indispensable service to our community. I also wanted to add that as an attorney, I have seen drug court operate, and that approach to law enforcement, which not only holds them accountable, but it provides resources, community resources to these people that they desperately need. They don't need to be locked up. They need help overcoming their addiction. And those resources are invaluable. The other thing is, as an attorney, I'm also a family law attorney. And so many times I see clients calling the police because they've got some kind of dispute that could be resolved if they took the time to talk to one another, to be peacemakers in their home and in their personal lives. We didn't get to this ultimate question for you folks, which was, how do we help with this? But as an attorney, I've seen that. Can we just be peacemakers in our homes and in our families, try to resolve what we can and not put that burden on our law enforcement? This is Tara Taylor. She wanted to have the mic for a minute, so I'm going to let Tara take it.
I just love an open mic. First of all, thank you guys so much. I know a few of you. I was going to talk to Chris right before the shutdown. We were just scheduled to get together. I've talked to Ryan a little bit. I'm a mom. I'm a hairdresser, and I'm a huge fan of Weber County. I'm from Weber County. I love it, and I appreciate all the work you do. I just really appreciate it. 5 years ago, had to started going through a divorce. I needed to get a protective order, and I knew nothing about that. And so I started coming to these things with Pat. I started coming to anything that I could do to learn about protective orders because I knew nothing about it. After 5 years, several attorneys, thousands of dollars, countless police reports to countless violations, including fraud, theft, car tampering, sugaring, stalking, cyber stalking, attempting to Facebook friends my siblings, relatives, and attorneys, texting, threats, terminating utilities, terminating internet, remotely resetting my phone, tracking me, etc. I reported to the police because I had to. Besides being a bother to them, I then realized the discriminating actions, no violation enforced except for a few stern conversations they've had. I have 2 teenage children. I went to their DARE program, and I was so sad because the things that they were teaching us were not anything that my kids were learning. My kids had to go to the police station to talk to them about their father harassing them on their phone because I couldn't say, turn your phones off or block him. So I've done everything I possibly can, including coming here today. I've done this for 5 years. All I'm looking for is an answer of what us as mothers, and I'm sure a lot of us in here are parents, of what it is we can do, because I spent 5 years of my kid's life pursuing this and begging for an answer of what can I do to get a little bit faster response before I'm bankrupt or dead with my children. As I know people personally that have been murdered. I personally know someone whose spouse killed 3 kids and himself. So I was suggested when I had to go to family therapy because of court, I was suggested to get a concealed carry permit, which I did. I've never had to get one before. I never had any desire to, but I did because I'm doing every single thing I possibly can. So I couldn't have picked a better panel to talk to today. And so I had to.
Because I think this might be a little bit personal.
Okay.
We might want to discuss. Sheriff Urban said that he'd be glad to stay after.
Oh, you're fine. This is, I just was saying, it's hard to meet with you guys. You're very busy. And Ryan was very helpful and set time apart for me to talk to him. So the thing is, it is very personal to me, but also people know that I'm going through this. People call me for advice.
Okay.
So thank you.
Many of us know people who are going through something.
Right. And absolutely, these are very troubling situations. But part of the problem as an attorney, I know that law enforcement can't operate unless they have an order that authorizes them to intervene in your life. And sometimes the only solution is to get that order from the court. But it is a difficult and timely and expensive process. I echo what you're saying. Yeah. So thank you for that perspective. We will now stand adjourned, but I know at least Sheriff Arbin had a few minutes. He was happy to talk to any of you who have other questions. Yes, Suzanne.
Chris, what magazine or what publication can we find that article in?
Well, so let's see. Find my glasses here. Sorry, see if I can remember where it was published exactly.
I remember when you didn't name those classes.
I know. I do too. I'm not exactly sure where it was posted, but I've got the address on my email, and I'm happy to share it with anyone who wants that.
Or if Chris, if you could copy it to me,
Okay.
I could send it
I'll
out.
send a copy to Lorraine, and anyone who wants it, you can get it from her.
That'd be great. Okay, yes, Sebastian.
Thank you guys for being here. Thank you, Lorraine. My question is specific for you for police, other police, and my council. We have a program, Red Star, between 12th Street and 2nd Street. We have the programs drug in the high school and distribution. What is the plan, or what is the how we can fix that, especially on the high school drug distribution? You have some plan to actually do something like that, because there is start with the young people involved in the drug. You know? And I have 5 boys, small graduate there, and we were 2, and I know something was going on. You know? And I try to keep my boys far away from there. This program, I want to hear what's the plan.
Can you guys hear me, or do you need me to go to the mic? Okay. I'm happy to talk about that. And so you're talking specifically about Ogden High. Is that what I understood? Ogden High School. So we have school resource officers that operate in all of our high schools, our junior highs. We have one that operates in one of our elementaries, as well as liaisons with a bunch of the other elementaries. So we do a lot of outreach through our SRO program in dealing with those issues. If it becomes something that goes beyond an individual who has drugs within the school, then we look at involving other people like our strike force to see if it's something that is a distribution chain that's happening. So the reality is, though, I'd have to go pull the numbers and look. I don't think we have a high number of drug offenses occurring that we're getting. So if that information is happening, we need people within the school, we need students, we need other people utilizing the resources available to them to report that. We have the 1-800-TIP-A-COP line. There's a text line that can be used. There's ways that information can get us to us, giving that information to the SROs So that kind of goes back to our communication thing. We need everybody else to gather this intelligence and pass that information back to us so that we know that there is a problem. Because if we pull numbers and look at drug arrests within Ogden High, I think it's going to show it's going to be a low number. But that doesn't necessarily mean paint the picture unless we're getting information and intelligence. So just like in a neighborhood, I may not know a house at such and such address is a drug house because I drive by in my police car, but I can't sit every day there. I can't be there the whole time watching that neighborhood. So until somebody steps up and calls our Tippecanoe line or develops that lead, then we can dive into that. So what we need is if there is a situation going in Ogden High that needs to be addressed, it's getting the school administration with our SROs and talking about that to build a plan. Right now, I'll be honest, I'm not aware of one that's been brought forward. Had there been one, we'd be attacking that aggressively. Obviously, drugs in and of itself is an issue, but now talking about bringing it into a school and in that type of environment is drastically worse than other things. So I would love to chat with you after and find out where your information and who you're gathering it from, because we can take their information and move forward with it. But it's just about the communication and getting that intelligence. Does that make sense?
I'll say too, I worked in a troubled youth hospital for 8 years, well before I ever thought about getting into politics or anything else. And to build on something Chris said, I think is critically important. Part of what kids need or criminals need when they're in a cycle is an intervention. Accountability comes after there's first an intervention. They can't self-distract themselves from those environments that they find themselves in. That was the whole purpose of us having an inpatient program for a lot of these kids that were really struggling. I'll give you an example. The JJRI program, we had a group of 3 juveniles that boosted 43 cars in 2 months. And our guys would be writing a report in the parking lot while their parents picked them up and walked them back to their car, and then had no accountability at home at all. So our people need tools to provide an intervention so that people will be willing to listen at that point, because they can't just say no to drugs and say no to this or anything else. They need to be pulled out of that environment for a little bit and be given a dose of reality. And this is where you're going. And here are some ways we can help you. And so giving our law enforcement groups and our SROs and some others more tools instead of less tools really is that intervention to pull them off of that. If they get 43 cars in 60 days and you get your hand slapped, you're just going to continue to think there are no consequences. You can do whatever you want and nothing's going to happen to you. And there needs to be that intervention first, and then the accountability comes after they get access to resources. So that's what we're working on, and we've been working with the legislature on, is that let's give us an opportunity to provide an intervention to people, not just kids, to your question, Sebastian, but to criminals that find themselves in a position they can't extract themselves from. There needs to be an intervention, and then there needs to be access to resources and tools. Once they get cleaned up, they get a little bit of clarity, they're much more likely to take access those tools and those resources that are available and turn it around. If there's never an intervention, they just get to continue doing these things and having fun with it and getting kind of drunk on the adrenaline when they're kids. There's never going to be a way to pull them out of that environment. And so the intervention, which our people provide and the people wearing badges here provide, I think is hypercritical. And that's where the next steps come in, where the accountability and some other things come online. So we cannot continue to peel away at our opportunities to provide interventions to people that will not pull themselves out of it on their own.
Thank you so much.
This has been fabulous. I wish we had another hour. I was just thinking as he was talking, Mayor Caldwell was talking, one of the issues I see in my own home is children who are upset that they got a ticket, right? Upset that they got pulled over, or that they didn't get away with something that was illegal, frankly, was illegal. We help law enforcement when we reinforce the rule of law for everybody, right? Everybody, every law is important, right? So anyway, thank you so much for being here, each one of you. It's been wonderful. And if you want questions afterwards, please stay. Thank you.